Hi, everyone. I want to thank you again for joining us for our AOJ Biz Chat. We have Deputy Chief Cramer on the line from Corcoran PD and Lieutenant Matt Smith with Lemoore PD on the line. Deputy Chief Cramer, why don't we start with you? Why don't you give us just a quick introduction about your role there at Corcoran PD?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Cramer. I'm the Deputy Chief at the Corcoran Police Department.
Thank you so much.
Give me 1 second. Let me turn something down.
Okay.
I have arrived.
Had my radio up too loud.
Hi, Gary. How you doing?
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, doing well, doing well.
Is that Terry Davis?
It is, sir. That's my
I can't see you, but I can hear you and I recognize your voice. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm sorry to interrupt, please.
All right.
Deputy Chief Cramer, you introduced yourself a little bit there saying that you're the Deputy Chief at the Corcoran PD. Please share with us a little bit about your background and how you obtained your current position at Corcoran's Police Department.
Sure. So I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. I started my career actually with the Lemoore Police Department. I spent about 12 years with the Lemoore Police Department. I left there in 2007. I was the detective sergeant. And I came to the Corcoran Police Department as the Deputy Chief. During my time in law enforcement, rising through the ranks, I've done a large number of assignments. We don't have time to go over all of them, but I actually taught DARE back when people actually taught DARE. I was a school resource officer. I've been a range master, impact weapons instructor, arrest control instructor, youth development officer, detective sergeant, FTO. I've done quite a few things in law enforcement, and I've been privileged to have the opportunity to do those things. And I think the combination of having the ability, the opportunity, and the willingness to do a variety of different assignments in law enforcement is really what afforded me the opportunity to be able to promote to the rank of Deputy Chief.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. You did do a lot of stuff. Those are a lot of different roles that you shared with us right now. So thank you.
Work at a small department, you have to do a lot of things.
Yeah. So my next question for you is, what motivated you to go into law enforcement?
So, you know, the canned answer, everybody wants to help people. And that was true for me. I knew growing up that I always wanted to pick a profession that I could make a difference and impact people's lives in a positive way. But I really didn't know what direction I wanted to go. But as a young kid, I had a next door neighbor by the name of Matt Baskell. He was several years older than me. He was an athlete. He was a kid that I looked up to. I always admired. And when I was in high school, he became a police officer in our hometown, which is Clovis, California. He became a police officer, and when I saw him in the role of a police officer, I had a couple of discussions with him. And at that moment, I knew that law enforcement was the career path that I was going to follow.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Question 3 is, what aspects of working in law enforcement are the most rewarding and the most challenging?
So I would say the most rewarding is the fact that we know we're making a positive difference on people's lives. We're making a genuine impact. And that could be simply making somebody's day that was the victim of a theft and be able to track down their property and return it to them. Or it can be helping somebody survive and get through the emotional trauma of a sexual assault, or a family dealing with a traumatic experience of a homicide. All of those offer opportunities to know that you're making a difference in people's lives. And I would say that is absolutely hands down the most rewarding aspect of our job. The most challenging, I think there's probably a couple that I would not necessarily give one more significance than the other, but currently in law enforcement, what I see as a couple of our biggest challenges is particularly in California with the ever-changing landscape with our legislation and the laws that impact us. With AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57, they certainly have challenged law enforcement to continue to keep our community safe. But our community doesn't expect anything less of us. And so we have to find creative ways to work within the law, within the landscape that has been given to us, and still keep keep our community safe. And I do think we're going to make some progress. There's some new legislation. It's being called Reducing Crime and Keeping California Safe Act. And I think we're going to get some reform on some of this Prop 47, Prop 57 stuff, which will help. And I think will move us in the right direction. The other challenge is recruitment. Nationwide, we're seeing a drop in recruitment in law enforcement. I think there's a lot of things that impact that, not the least of which is probably our media, and they don't always portray us in the greatest of light. Sometimes we deserve the media we get, but oftentimes the true story is not told. And for younger generations, it's hard for them to choose that career when they feel like people don't appreciate them anymore. And sometimes that's the message that gets sent out there. And the reality is when we work in this job, we understand that the community still appreciates us. There's several surveys that happen every year. Some of them date back to the 1950s, and they measure the level of trust and confidence in law enforcement from the community members. And we know in the last few years, we've actually been at all-time highs on that. But you wouldn't realize that if you just listen to the message that's getting preached out there. And so I think we have to do a better job selling our story and getting our story out there and recruiting that younger generation that is going to carry us forward and make sure that we have an ample number of applicants out there that we can recruit from and find tomorrow's leaders.
Definitely, thank you. We do have a question in the chat from Jose Murrieta, our advisor here at West Hills College Lemoore. He wants to know, what educational pathway did you take to fulfill your career goals?
So pathway, I guess, refers to a specific pathway. I don't know what level you're talking about. When I was in high school, certainly there was no term called pathway. But I did seek some educational opportunities in administration of justice. In fact, I do have an associate's degree from West Hills in administration.
Oh. Okay, thank you for sharing that. And just so you guys know, if there are any questions, feel free to share them in the chat, and I'll share them out with our guest speakers, okay? Thank you so much. Okay, so my next question, Deputy Chief Cramer, for you is, what made you decide to promote through the ranks in law enforcement?
When I was in the police academy, some of the people that had the biggest impact on me were police officers that held the rank of sergeant. And so when I first pinned on my badge, I knew that my career goal was to promote to sergeant and to be a field supervisor. And I was fortunate and I was able to achieve that goal 5 years into my career. And so at that moment, I had to reevaluate, and I knew I didn't want to be stagnant. I knew I didn't want to do that for the next 25 years and stay in the same position. And so as I continue to reevaluate where I wanted to go, I realized that we need good future leaders, and we need people that are students of leadership to guide our departments in the future. And I felt like I could have a bigger and a better impact on the organization as a whole if I were to strive to promote up into the administration, which is what prompted me to do so.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And then in your previous law enforcement roles, what role did you enjoy the most and why?
So I've had a lot of good roles. I enjoyed my time in detectives. I really enjoyed my time working at the gang task force. I spent a few years doing that, doing some major crimes. But I would say the single most enjoyable time in my career was that of a patrol sergeant. As a patrol sergeant, you're able to have a very distinct and noticeable impact on young officers coming into the field. Our officers come to us and they're very enthusiastic, they're bright-eyed, they're willing to learn. But as you can imagine, it's not always an easy job. And so it is oftentimes easy to get cynical in this job. And I feel like as a patrol sergeant has more ability to impact that new recruit, keep them focused on why they came to the job, and keep them with a positive outlook, and to assure them that they're making a positive difference on people.
Okay, thank you. And then in my next question, what are some of your regular responsibilities as a deputy chief with Corcoran PD?
So as a deputy chief, we're a small department. We have one deputy chief, and so I'm ultimately responsible for all of the day-to-day operations of the organization, which includes our patrol, our investigations division, our records division, and our communications division. And so, you know, some of the easy tasks that I deal with are scheduling, making sure that we have appropriate coverage on patrol and that our dispatchers have appropriate coverage. And then it's also my responsibility to schedule people for training and to develop a training plan that makes sure that we're developing all of our staff and that we're serving the public the best that we can. I also am responsible for writing and approving our policies, which is really a daily activity with the ever-changing landscape that we work in, the expectations of the community, the changing in laws. And so I'm responsible for writing and approving all of our policies. And I also work on budgets and make sure that all of our staff have the resources that they need to serve our community.
Okay. We do have a comment here from Terry Davis. Terry, I'm going to unmute you so that you can actually ask your question or comment. If I can.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, Chief. Hey, we got a real shortage of police officer candidates right now, and you know, agencies are down positions and can't find qualified people. So I get a lot of students. There's, you know, I've always encouraged them since they're young, get your bachelor's degree, then go into law enforcement. And I'm not sure that that has to stay static that way. I'm not so sure they shouldn't get an associate's and then perhaps, you know, take advantage of the opportunities that are available and get in now. And of course, they can work on their bachelor's later, although it's more difficult, and they're going to get tons of post certifications that have a lot more meaning, I think. I'm just curious what in-service people were thinking about that.
Yeah, it's a good question, Terry. Yeah, I certainly encourage everybody to get a formal education. So in California law enforcement, you cannot be hired as a full-time police officer until the age of 21. So I think it absolutely makes sense to minimally obtain an associate's degree before joining the profession if you know this is the direction you want to go. And I would encourage them to continue to work towards their bachelor's degree as well. But I know some people don't graduate with a bachelor's degree until they're 22 or 23, or depending on what path life takes them, you know, some people may be even older than that. So you can certainly join law enforcement without a bachelor's degree. I think an associate's degree, you should absolutely get that. And then if you're in a position in your life to join the law enforcement field, you can continue to work on that bachelor's degree, or even there's many people in law enforcement that have master's degrees and even PhDs. And so I think it's important to be a lifelong learner and to always push not only your formal education, but just your personal education as well.
So that kind of actually leads into my next question for you, which is what are some of the different attributes or skills, including education, that someone would need to pursue in order to succeed in law enforcement?
So in terms of education specifically, the more education you have, the bigger leg up you have. Certainly when you go to promote through an organization, those with education tend to rise to the top and promote quicker and become the leaders of our organizations. In terms of personal attributes, I would say first and foremost, it is all about integrity. We have to hire people that we can trust that always will do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And so integrity is by far and away the most important attribute that anybody can have. But I also think along with that, I think that we need people that are selfless, that are willing to give up some personal sacrifice. It's not an easy job. You don't always get to dictate your schedule. You might get interrupted in the middle of your day or dinner with your family, and you need to be willing to do that to help others. And I think a little bit of humility and humbleness goes a long ways as well.
Thank you. What prevents applicants or employees from being successful in this field?
So I would say in terms of what prevents applicants from joining the field, most often it's an integrity issue. It's somebody that has either lied or concealed something on an application or through the background process, or they have something in their background that's a moral turpitude issue that we just can't overcome. You know, somebody that's been involved in embezzlement or something like that. That's probably the biggest factor that prevents people from getting into this job. We aren't looking for people that are perfect. There are no perfect people in this world. And so we're not looking for perfect people, but we are looking for people with strong integrity. And that's probably the thing that prevents them most often. And then once people get into the job, I would say what prevents people from being successful on the field training program and or just through their probationary period, which is 1 year in California, is the lack of ability to be a critical thinker and to think on your own. We have a host of laws and policies that are put in place, but we can't possibly write a playbook that will spell out every possible situation you might see today. And so an individual really has to be able to look at any situation, apply the law, apply policy, apply the vision of the department, and make decisions that are going to result in the best outcome for everybody. And so critical thinking skills in law enforcement are paramount importance.
Yeah. Recently, the governor of the state of California declared a state of emergency, considering everything that's going on right now. Does that affect law enforcement, and if so, how?
So it does affect law enforcement. I would say currently the current state of emergency that we are under has not impacted us here at Corcoran Police Department very much. We've also declared a local emergency here in the city of Corcoran. We really declared ours looking forward. We don't want to wait until we have a true emergency before we declare that emergency. We know it's coming. We know that virus is out there and it's spreading. But the novel coronavirus, it has changed some of our operations. We have closed our lobby. It is only open to the public via appointment only, and it's only if people really have to come down here and meet with our staff. We've changed our responses to calls. We are now only responding to emergency calls for service and in-progress calls for service. All other calls for service we're handling via telephone call, and we're allowing people to email us or send us pictures if they have vandalism or something of that nature. So the novel coronavirus has certainly impacted our operations, and our primary focus of us reducing some of the things we're responding to is we're trying to keep our staff healthy. We're a small department, and if we end up with 20% or 30% of our staff that are afflicted by coronavirus and or quarantined by coronavirus because they had contacts with somebody that had it, it will have a significant impact on our operation. And we have planned for the worst. We do have contingencies in place that we have thought about how we'll continue to operate if we do lose 20%, 30%, or 40% of our staff. We hope that doesn't happen, but we're prepared to do so. But the governor's declaration, all of the orders that are coming down, they could impact us. Currently, we're actually seeing a lot of compliance with the orders. Essential personnel only, essential businesses only being opened. We are seeing a lot of compliance with that, which is great. And so we would hope that that continues. If it doesn't, there's a possibility we would have to get involved and enforce those orders that have been given. And then we are paying more attention to our grocery sites, places that are still open for business, because there has been a little bit of a panic, most of it probably not necessary, but people are hoarding up on items and afraid that items aren't going to be there. And we have dealt with a couple of incidents at our grocery stores where there have been arguments and threats of physical violence. And so this whole event has impacted us in those ways. But fortunately, we haven't had a significant impact yet, and we're hoping that it stays that way.
And then my last question for you is, what advice would you give students who want to follow in your footsteps?
I would say this, that I've been in law enforcement for 25 years. I would not change anything. I love the profession. It is absolutely a noble profession. And so if it's something that you have an interest in doing, I would encourage you to seek that out, to follow your dreams and become a police officer. We need good people to be the leaders for tomorrow. And I would encourage all law enforcement agencies allow citizens to do ride-alongs, and for those that are interested in law enforcement, I would encourage them to go and do ride-alongs and do it with a variety of departments. Number one, you want to make sure that law enforcement is the right decision for you, because doesn't make anybody bad or not worthy, but it really isn't for everybody. And some people think it is. And so they really need to get their feet wet, go on some ride-alongs and make that decision if it is what they want. And if it is, I would encourage them to do a ride-along with a variety of departments, because we all have very similar missions and visions, but every department does have its own distinct culture. And you want to find a department that you're going to fit in. And I would seek out that department that you want to work for. And like Mr. Davis mentioned earlier, there is a smaller number of applicants in law enforcement. And so those going into law enforcement, they can be a little more picky than they could back when I started 25 years ago. There was a large number of candidates and very few spots to be filled. And so candidates can be picky, and I would encourage them to do so and pick a department that's right for them. So I think that would probably be my advice.
Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate all of the things that you shared. If anyone on the call has any questions for Deputy Chief Cramer, feel free to send them to me in the chat, and I will ask them for you. Now we're going to start our informal interview with Lieutenant Smith from Lemoore PD. So Lieutenant Smith, I'm going to unmute you.
Me.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Okay, so Lieutenant Smith, why don't you give us just a brief introduction? You can talk about your role at Lemoore PD, and then we can go into some questions for you.
Yeah, sure. I'm Matt Smith, currently a lieutenant, newly promoted. Been a lieutenant for about a month or two here at Lemoore. I live in Lemoore. I've been here and employed for about 12 years. I have a family here. I have a wife and 2 young kids. I joined the Marine Corps after high school. So I did 4 years overseas. I was in Iraq, I was in Afghanistan. And then I went to the academy and got hired on with Lemoore pretty much right away. And now I'm here. As a lieutenant, I do what DC does, but on a smaller scale. So I oversee operations. Luckily, we have 2 lieutenants that split that position. So I do operations. The other lieutenant does support. So we're able to break it down to who oversees patrol, who oversees reserves, who sees records, who oversees detectives. And it's just a better scale to help us all out and get all our work done.
That's good. Thank you. Jose Murrieta, our advisor, congratulates you on your recent promotion, and I believe we all on the call want to congratulate you on that. That's very exciting.
Thank you.
Congrats. So our first question for you is, please share with us a little bit about your background, which you kind of did a little bit already in your introduction, but how you also obtained your current position at Lemoore's PD.
Well, my current position right now is, again, it's a lieutenant, and I went from officer. I held a handful of specialties. I went into range master fairly quickly, became an armorer, became a field training officer. Then I moved to detectives, became a corporal at some point. I was on the SWAT team, became a sergeant. After being a sergeant for, I believe it was just under 2 years, I promoted to lieutenant. I think my background in the military really helps, and any recruits we get from the military, their life experience, they're already used to. I mean, if you understand law enforcement, we're paramilitary. So a lot of people don't understand chain of command. They don't understand a lot of that in general. So military is just more structured, and you start from a young age and learn leadership skills. And law enforcement today is all about good leadership from the top down and having good officers, try to be their role models in general with integrity and ethics, and getting officers, again, to do the right thing.
That's good. Thank you. And what led you to choose this career path? You mentioned the military. I'm assuming that had some.
Yeah, I don't have an answer. I got out of the military. I started looking for jobs. Jobs were scarce. I had a few friends getting into law enforcement, so I applied for the academy, and I really just gave it a shot. I didn't know really what to expect. I've heard that a lot of military get out and go into law enforcement specifically because their skills, their mindset, their structure, and I kind of just listened to advice, and I gave it my all. I went for it, and I'm really happy I did. I really enjoy it.
Sounds good. Thank you. In your previous law enforcement roles, what role did you enjoy the most and why?
I think the longest billet I held, everybody liked sergeant, and I really enjoyed sergeant. But I spent a lot of time in detectives. Detectives was my favorite role because you really get in deep with the investigation. So you start building those one-on-one relationships with the victim, overseeing their cases, making sure everything's taken care of, going to court. And the better you do as a detective or an investigator, the more you know, the more experienced you are, the better you do in court typically, the better the case is handled and prosecuted through the DA's office. So it's really on your shoulders in regards to, it could be the interview, could be the deal breaker with the suspect, or your horrible interview with the victim, or what evidence you seize, what search warrants you decide to go after. So it's really gratifying to be able to see a case from start to finish. You know, you have the victim in the court, you're the one testifying, everyone's looking at you to make this case the best it can be. And don't get me wrong, there'll be cases that a jury just decides to find him not guilty, but at least I figured I did everything possible. And the same thing with the DA's office. We did everything possible to prosecute these individuals. But when you watch it from start to finish, especially with sex crimes, kids, when you watch their assailant, their attacker, their abuser, get the full sentence from the judge and the jury finds them guilty, it's just, I mean, you'll see victims cry in court and they'll come personally thank you for everything you did. And I think that's what meant the most to me overall, going after child crimes. And I really targeted child crimes and detectives. So that will be forever something I'm grateful for, and, you know, something that really made my mark in.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you for sharing. I understand that there's a lot of report writing for anyone in law enforcement. Can you speak to the importance of writing skills as a police officer and in law enforcement?
Yeah, so it's not your standard, I'm writing a paper for school. It's going to be a little more detailed. When you go through the field training program, as long as you have a general understanding of how to write, even if it's report papers for school, as long as you have a general understanding of how to do so, structure. We have a lot of people that are bilingual, and, you know, Spanish is their first language, so they learned English second. So there's a lot of difficulties in trying to get that on a professional report. But it's nothing that the FTOs can't, our field training officers can't work with. Again, if you can't write a good report, you really can't be a cop. We'll do everything we can, though. We have individuals that start at certain levels. Our reports are structured a certain way. When you go to the academy, they'll teach you start to finish on how to write a proper report. So if that's an issue, the academy will catch it. And if you can't pass it through the academy, obviously they won't move you on. But even if you can do it, bare minimally, our FTOs will get you through that. But our new officers that come from the academy have done a really good job with the reports. So whatever they're doing there, it's working. I can tell you that much.
Good. What kind of specialized trainings do you think prospective police officers should pursue?
Specialized training. That's a good one. I don't know much you could do for specialized training. I did the military. I think the military gave me all the skills I needed to possess to really succeed in life, just in general. I mean, I'm 12 years on, I'm 35 years old, and I'm a lieutenant here in Lemoore. So it's pretty rare. I'm a pretty young lieutenant, but I think learning leadership skills and all the training I got through the military was able to get me to the level I am. But obviously, if you're not going to do the military, my personal advice is just get some life experience. You have to figure out something. If you're going to school, get a part-time job. Do something where you socialize with people and you have some type of management overseeing you, because when you come to our structure, if it's your first job and it's your first time really talking to somebody or trying to socialize, you ever seen an officer awkwardly talk to a person out in the public? It's because they've never had that experience. And the new generation, they would rather text you, you know, the question and, you know, give them your phone number and do it that way. So the social skills is a huge thing, and any life experience is a huge bonus.
Okay, thank you. Law enforcement is obviously a very stressful job. How do you manage on-the-job stress?
Well, before I used to do all the fun stuff like camping, or I'd go out to the range and practice shooting. I would go to the beach, I'd go to the coast. I do a lot more of that type thing. But now I have a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, so it's a little harder to do those things, but they're my world. So I go home and I play with them and I forget about everything else. My 1-year-old just wants to climb. He's walking around. My 4-year-old, first he wasn't talking. Now I can't get him to stop talking. So, just playing
Yeah.
with the kids, really. It's anything with the kids. Now we'll take one big coast trip with the kids, go have them see the beach, or we'll fly to New York for the summer, or not me at least. My family goes out there to see my wife's family, and they have lake property, and they go boating. So yeah, the off the job stressor, and we're pretty good on that one.
Okay. For any AOJ student looking for opportunities to gain exposure to law enforcement, what are some opportunities available for them?
So just exposure in general. For the younger ones under 18, obviously going to school, they can do explores. Then we open it up to ride-along, so they can apply to our agency for a ride-along. They just got to fill out their application. It's a little form that goes to the supervisor. They can put a date and time that they want to come. Also give them a call, try to schedule it to the best of both schedules. And then we have the Citizens Academy, and that goes once a year. It's every Wednesday for 8 weeks. It's approximately 3 to 4 hours. I used to teach the firearms section for that portion of it. I haven't, because I have other range masters doing that portion now. But it's a lot of fun. You get to hear, like, for example, the firearms portion, we'll go over the gun laws. We'll talk about our policy in regards to lethal force, use of force. We have our Milo simulator, so they'll be able to get up there on the screen and practice it. Other classes will cover different crimes, and it just goes, there's a schedule for what's going to cover. And I think a lot of people really learn a lot, and they take a lot from that class. And if you decide to go further and become a volunteer in policing here, you can help with different things, such as we use them for our big events. They can help block roads. They can go on patrol, and they're basically our eyes and ears. So it's like neighborhood watch, going out there, and they got a radio and they're letting us know if they see suspicious activity, and they're just observe and report, if they decide to help us out in that way. But whatever capacity, I think it's very beneficial.
If we have students who are wanting to either be in the Explorers program or join the Citizens Academy, how would they initiate that application process?
So those forms will all be online. If you go to the city of Lemoore, you go to the police department, we'll have all our applications on there for, like I said, pretty much any of those.
So this wasn't
obviously, sorry, everything's on temporary hold because of what's going on. So you'll see
right.
the postponement, but yeah, it'll be back on as soon as we get over this.
Okay. And then how long is the application process? Like, let's say a student applies, how long before they find out whether they were accepted or the results of their application?
It's really, really quick. As soon as we get an application, we process it. So within a week or so, you'll hear back from us as soon as we get it. Sometimes people are on vacation and stuff, but we get to it as quickly as possible. Turnaround time will be very quick.
Okay, sounds good. Well then, I do have one last question for you, and that is the same question I asked Deputy Chief Cramer, but what advice would you give a student who is interested in law enforcement?
Just like I said before, life experience. You get into this job without any knowledge of the workforce or really being able to talk to customers. I mean, obviously it's going to be on a different level of law enforcement and other jobs, but you got to have those social skills. You got to be able to understand that. I would, just like DC said, obtain a degree. I didn't obtain a degree until I became a sergeant. I started doing my classes online when my kids were really young, and it was a horrible time to do it. But I'm like, I got to do it now. So I got my associates in criminal justice. I think I have 4 more classes for my bachelor's. So I'm almost there. But yeah, I think the education just helped out a lot. The classes they provide for criminal justice, I thought, I really got a lot from them. I actually really enjoyed it. I might even go further. I don't know. It took me, I'm 35. It took me years and years to figure out that education's important. And I strive to get my officers to, I'm telling them to get an education, but I didn't have one. So it's like, how do you tell them to do that when, you're not leading by example? So I think education's huge. And I think just any life experience you can. If you're interested in the military, like I said, we specifically target military. We love the military personnel. Them getting out, their structure, everything else. But again, if you have a degree, that's a huge thing too. So hopefully both.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay. Does anyone have any questions for either of these two guest speakers? Feel free to type them in the chat if you do, and I can ask them really quickly. And then it looks like Terry Davis says 21 to be a peace officer, but hiring today at about what age? 23, 24. And that could be a typo. Was he meaning police officer? Terry, I'll unmute you and you can ask. Or maybe I won't.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, you're good, Terry. You can ask.
Okay, the only question was, I know that you have to be 21 to be a peace officer, but at what age are you generally hiring people today? I mean, 25, 26? I know you're trying to get some people with some life experience, and it's hard, it's tough to find them.
Yeah, a lot of them are really young. They come right out of the academy, and we hire them. So obviously at the academy, they're 21. It's a 6-month academy. It's typically a 6-month process to get hired. Once you put out your applications, if you don't get hired within the academy, it's probably a year. So yeah, about 23 to 25, I would say, would be our biggest hiring age group. But we do get individuals. We just hired one that's, man, I want to say he's just under 40. So there's different ages you decide to do it in life, but I think the majority of our group's going to be the younger ones.
And if there are any other questions, feel free to keep typing them in the chat box. Okay, I don't see anyone typing. So I want to thank you guys for being on the call and letting me ask you guys these questions. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I know right now it's a busy time frame for everyone, so I just appreciate you taking the time out of your day to share this information with us and our students.
Absolutely. We hope to see people at the Citizens Academy or come out on a ride along. It'll be a lot of fun, I promise.
Sounds good. Okay. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. Bye.